Hey everyone, we're just getting started, so we'll wait a few minutes to let people come in and then we'll get started with the webinar. All right, we can go ahead and get started. Hi everyone, and welcome to today's special webinar on supporting students, families, and staff after a natural disaster. This is a webinar, a special Q&A webinar that we're putting on in wake of last week's severe weather in Arkansas. And it's put on by the Arkansas Trauma Resource Initiative for Schools, or TRIS, which is a UAMS program, as well as Project Play, also from UAMS. And you'll hear a little bit more about those programs later in the presentation. Our webinar today will be led by Dr. Nikki Edge from the UAMS Department of Family and Preventive Medicine. And she is director of both the TRIS and Project Play programs. We'll also have Emily Robbins, who is the social work program manager for trauma care with TRIS, and Christine Lynn, who is the early childhood mental health consultant with Project Play. My name is Anna Kate Bogards, and I'll be your webinar moderator for today. Before we get started, I wanted to cover some brief housekeeping announcements, and then we'll go from there. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, make sure that you post those into the Q&A. There's a Q&A box, and that way we'll be sure to see your questions. We encourage you to put those in throughout the presentation. We'll make sure to get to those at the end. Also, feel free to use the chat, but if you do have a question, make sure you put it in the Q&A and then we'll be sure to see it. If you are an early care and education provider and you need PDR credit, you can put your name and your PDR number in the chat now or by the end of the webinar. We'll remind you again at the end of the webinar, and we'll make sure that you get credit for this webinar. Finally, we are recording the webinar. So if you want to share this with your colleagues who maybe weren't able to make it during this hectic week, we will email a link to that recording. So you'll be able to share that. And that's it for housekeeping announcements. So I will turn it over to Dr. Edge.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for being with us on this, what is a stressful week, a busy week. We know many people who need this information might not be able to be here today. So glad we're able to record this and share later. As Anna Kate mentioned, this is brought to you by a collaborative between the TRIS, as we call it, and Project Play. So if you're not familiar with our programs, just wanted to tell you a little bit about it, and we'll say more at the end. The TRIS is our initiative that supports K-12 schools in responding to and recovering from traumatic events that affect schools' communities. And because we wanted to be able to cover the full age range today, including our infants, toddlers, and preschoolers in early care and education settings, we're partnered with Project Play. Project Play is our state's infant and early childhood mental health consultation program that supports early care and education providers in Arkansas. And again, we'll share more information at the end. Before we get started today, we wanted to acknowledge that obviously it's been a terribly difficult week for our state. Many of us on this Zoom today experienced very scary things last Friday. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the events of last Friday, talking about natural disasters, talking about tornadoes, and it may bring up some emotions that we all felt last Friday. And so if you start to feel overwhelmed, need to step away, we encourage you to do so. Do what you need to do to kind of protect yourself and your heart and your mind. And we are recording this presentation, so if you do need to step away, you'll be able to view it later. our objectives for today are to spend the first half of our time together, or about that, just sharing some basic information, some common reactions that we may see in kids of different ages after the kinds of events that we experienced last Friday, to talk about how teachers and other caring adults can help support kids, how we would know children or other adults may need more help, and what mental health resources are available if that's the case. And then we wanted to save plenty of time for our two trauma experts, mental health professionals here, Emily and Christine, to be able to just take questions and discuss with you things that may be on your mind. This is your opportunity to ask a mental health professional something specific to the things that have been troubling you in your school setting, things that you're worried about or that are on your mind. So we will dive right in, and as we think about kind of age-related reactions to traumatic events, I want to start by reminding us of just what we mean when we use the word trauma, what that definition is. And we would say that something is traumatic if there was an event that occurred, in this case, that event was a tornado, that was experienced by someone as threatening to their life or their well-being, or the life or well-being of someone that they love. So much so that it leaves them with lingering effects on their brain, on their body, on their behavior, on their emotions. And the reason I wanted to bring up that definition is that because the way each of us experience an event can be different. We can all go through the same set of circumstances, but experience it in a different way. And part of that difference can be about age and level of development. It can also be about previous experience, the reactions of others around us. Kids are always looking for clues in the adults around them for how to react in a situation, or how to tell them how scared they should be. So age and development are part of the differences in how children experience traumatic events and how they express any distress that they may have. So let's just talk about what you might see in kids of different ages, starting with our younger kids. So we know that in our preschool age kids, they may experience a particular feeling of helplessness, even more so than all of us who may have experienced some helplessness on Friday. Our youngest kids are least able to make decisions for themselves about how to stay safe. They may have confusion and uncertainty even about whether the danger is past. So as adolescents or adults, we're looking at our phones and we're trying to understand when the danger has passed, but kids may actually find themselves confused. They may actually even seeing events replay on TV, think it's happening again or that it's still happening. And so kind of some basic issues there of just letting them know when they are actually safe. They may have fewer words to tell us what's troubling them or what's worrying them or what is confusing them. And so some of what we may see, instead of clear communication about what they're experiencing, are things like loss of skills. So you may have a child who previously was separating fine at childcare, or going to bed fine on their own, or fully potty trained. And you may see that they kind of regress and suddenly they're acting like their younger self, as if they didn't have those particular set of skills. We may see sleep disturbances, night terrors, nightmares, trouble going to sleep, trouble staying asleep. We may see difficulties in kids expressing their emotions in play. They may repetitively kind of play out the tornado scene or experience. You might see them in the housekeeping section of your early care and education program, kind of reenacting it. For our school age children, they may have those same safety concerns, those same feelings of continued fear and sadness. They may have those same sleep problems. They may also have ideas that may be inaccurate about feelings of responsibility for the event, something they could have done differently, some way they could have stopped it, some way they could have helped their community or themselves stay safe. They may also, because the expectations for their performance in school are perhaps more. We may see more difficulty concentrating, difficulty focusing, and then physical complaints. So headaches, stomach aches that are kind of persisting without explanation or obvious cause, and then even kind of acting out or aggressive behavior. We may see some of those same things in adolescents. And then because, of course, they're adolescents, we'll see perhaps sometimes that self-consciousness that adolescents have. And the way that that might look in this situation is feeling like their response isn't normal, feeling self-conscious about their response or their feelings about the events, feeling like it's abnormal. They may have shame and guilt about surviving when other people didn't. They may have guilt around, again, a response that they could have taken or they think someone else could have taken to protect them. You see this on Facebook this week. You see kids posting things, maybe criticizing a response, thinking a siren went off too late or something could have happened differently. And then they can also kind of express some of that anger and frustration in ways that are self-destructive. So with the support of caring adults, for most kids, these kinds of signals of distress are going to start to lessen in a few days, in a few weeks. We'll talk at the end. Emily will share some thoughts about like, what's the point at which we should be concerned that it's not improving, that it's not lessening. So as we think about, the various ways to support children, one of the first things we think about is just being open to talking about it. So as a teacher, it's really just letting children and parents know you want to know how they were impacted and how they're doing. And that you're, a lot of times we've been asking each other in the hallway, how are you and were you impacted? And sometimes our first instinct is to say, oh, my house is okay. But as teachers, you can remind people that, yeah, I'm so glad that your house is okay. And I know that doesn't mean you haven't been through something, so how are you doing? Sometimes too, we hesitate to talk with kids about scary events because we think it's going to remind them of it. It's going to upset them, that bringing it up will be somehow damaging, but that's not the case. From our youngest kids all the way up to our teenagers, they do better when a safe and caring adult, gives them an outlet, to share how they're feeling, to share their questions, to share their worries and their concerns and their fears. Just like we adults need like accurate information, we're watching the news, we need a friend to talk to about it. So too do our kids. And so we can talk a little bit about some kind of tips for communication. And I think one of the most basic tips is that when it comes to talking about the difficult event itself, let the children's questions be your guide as to how much information to provide. So answer what they ask. And honestly and simply, and then you don't have to tell, much more information than what it is they're seeking and they're looking for. We also want to be sure, sometimes we try to protect kids, but the truth is that that misleading them won't be helpful. And so it can be tempting to kind of try to hide the fact that people have been hurt. Or yes, people have lost their houses, but we can't really mislead them. We have to be honest, and at the same time balance that information with all the ways we're working to keep them safe and healthy and protected. We also want to be careful. We want to be talking with kids, but we want to be careful about our adult to adult conversations that weren't necessarily meant for them to overhear. We might say things to each other that weren't meant for little ears. I always felt like my daughter had bionic ears growing up, and I was like, how did she hear me saying that? But she did. So here's some other kind of tips for developmentally appropriate discussions. So again, not forgetting to remind our youngest kids that the event is over and they're safe again. Again, remembering that if they see something on TV, they may think it's happening again. Also for our youngest kids, sometimes we have to give them the words for their feelings that they might be, experiencing, give them the word scared, nervous, worried. For our kids that are getting older, it's more about trying to let them open up to us and tell us how they're feeling. They may have those words that they can share with us. And the important thing here, I think, is to normalize their feelings. So letting them know it's normal after what you've been through to be scared, to be worried, to have it on your mind, but whatever that feeling is, it's normal. For adolescents too, we can acknowledge that whatever anger they're feeling or frustration they're feeling or worry they're feeling about things that could have been different, we want to normalize that as well. And if that anger starts to turn into more acting out behavior, we can understand that anger and also set some limits around the behavior. So just talking a little bit more about kind of monitoring emotions and validating those emotions. You know, sometimes when we have these conversations with children, they may show us they're upset, they may cry or be anxious or cranky or mad or whatever it is. And it may make us uncomfortable as adults and worried that we're doing the right thing by having these conversations. So it can be important to remember that it's not the conversation that's upsetting them, it's what's happened that's upsetting them. And there's sort of no avoiding that. And so we have to remember that the first step to kind of coping with feelings is to be able to acknowledge them. And they need to feel safe with us as adults, that it's okay to show that they're upset. Otherwise, they're going to be hiding their feelings and left to deal with them alone without the help of a caring adult. So some kids will tell us and talk to us in their words, and other kids, we're going to see it in behavior and in other signs around sleep or appetite. This picture on the screen that you see is a child from here in Central Arkansas whose mom gave us permission to share her story. This is a 4-year-old who's sheltered here in Little Rock in the bathtub with her siblings and her mom, and their house was basically destroyed. A few days later, the mom and dad were doing cleanup. She was staying with her grandparents, and the grandma gave her some art supplies, and this was the picture she created. And, you know, after kind of seeing how she was doing and talking with her, her mom kind of interpreted the picture as these smiling faces were all the helpers that have helped them in the days since this happened. And the rainbow kind of showed that she was maybe moving past the storm clouds and able to see things in a more positive way, maybe feeling more hopeful or safe or less scared. Now, of course, other kids are going to move through their feelings perhaps slower at a different pace. Some kids may still be feeling the storm clouds, may draw the storm clouds, may show us they're not through the fear, they're not through the scared, they're not through the worry. Also want to just note that we may see stronger reactions in kids who've had other traumas in their lives, even if it's a totally different kind of trauma. You know, maybe they've had exposure to domestic violence, or maybe they've experienced other difficult events. And we know that that pileup of traumatic events creates more risk to health and development than just, individual traumas. And so we may see bigger reactions in kids who've been through other difficult things. If you follow us on Facebook with Tris or our newsletter, you'll have the opportunity to get some resources that we recently shared out. One of them was a National Child Traumatic Stress Network set of resources on specific ways that kids at different ages can respond to these events, and specific things that parents and teachers can do to support kids, specific words we can say to try to be helpful. And I just wanted to encourage folks to be able to explore those resources. These are just a very few examples of what are the words we use when we're trying to validate or help kids feel safe or support them. And so sometimes it's just, as you see for our younger kids, letting them know we are safe now and I'm here, or validating it's okay to be mad. You can tell me you're mad using your words, you can't hit. Or acknowledging that we may have to adapt a little bit as kids work through sleep problems or fears. Maybe you're the early care and education teacher who needs to sit next to their cot at nap time and pat their back and encourage them that they're safe. These resources have words for kind of working through some hard conversations with older kids too. Their worries that they could have done something different. Or their worries that their fears are normal. So these are just some some ways that we can use, and there's lots more suggestions in our resources. One thing that's really hard about a disaster like this is that it throws us out of our routines. So schools may be closed for a time, parents may not be able to work, the electricity is out. And that is tough for kids on so many levels, because regular routines are what make life feel predictable and safe. Predictability is a sense of safety. And so as we can restore those routines and that sense of predictability, it's really helpful to do that kind of as soon as we can. Keep schedules as normal as possible, get back to routines as soon as we can. And it may feel weird to do so, but fun routines and fun rituals can be helpful too. So if you normally go to the park on Tuesdays after school, being able to go to the park and have some fun on Tuesday, even though it might feel weird when there's suffering kind of around us, but staying in those routines again can be helpful. In school settings, of course, kids may have a little trouble getting back into those routines. Maybe it's hard for them to separate from their parents or go back to the place where the sirens went off. And so, we may need to support some kids as they ease back in. If a child has higher anxiety, working on kind of that separation routine with an early care and education provider, or making a plan for an older child, who can they check in with if they start to feel anxious? Can they check in with the school counselor? For teachers who have kids coming back, again, remember that structure and predictability can be comforting. And so it might be a time where you're treating it a little bit like you would the beginning of the school year, and reminding kids of the schedule, reminding them of what's happening next, referring back, if you're working with young kids, to a schedule and pictures to remind them, we're back on track, here's what we're doing today. Sort of the same with the rules and expectations for your class. It can be a good time to review expectations and the rules that you have in place to keep your classroom safe, physically and emotionally. And we can do all that while maintaining some flexibility and understanding, of course, for what kids have been through, and flexing where we need to. Maybe we're lessening the workload, sending less homework home for a while, pushing a test back until kids' concentration is better. Understanding where some behavior is coming from, still setting limits around it, but acknowledging what kids have been through. I wanted to say just a few words about kind of managing things that might be reminders of trauma for kids. So we already kind of talked about adult conversations and kind of limiting some of those. Remembering that media coverage can increase anxiety. So the more time kids spend watching media of these kind of events, the more likely they are to have negative reactions, especially if they're seeing graphic images, chaos, injury. Those can be very upsetting. And of course, as we've been mentioning, young kids may not even understand that this isn't just repetitively happening. They may not realize we're watching pictures of the same event. You may also experience that kids are jumpier. They may startle more. So an unexpected noise, if the lights go out, it may remind them of, when the electricity went out. We may be long past this event and you get a stormy day and see that kids are jumpy or acting out, or there's a test of the weather alert system and kids are really on edge or reactive to that. So the more that we can prepare kids in advance for those things that are coming, prepare them certainly before there's another tornado drill in their school, preparing them for that Wednesday noon, weather test of the weather alert system, talking about the weather forecast if it's a stormy day and what we'll do to stay safe if needed. All of those things can be really helpful to kind of help manage these reminders of the traumatic event that kids have been through. And I'm going to turn it over at this point to Emily, who's going to take us through the next set of slides before our Q&A.
Okay, Anna Kate, can you just verify the view?
Yes, we can see it. Looks good.
Okay, thank you. So far we've talked a lot about supporting others and how to help our children and students, but it's also important to remember to care for yourself. Remember, you've been through these adverse events as well and may still be experiencing all of the things that come with these natural disasters. But for many of us who are in this helper field to help others, we might suppress our own emotions in order to take care of others. And at some point, we need to be able to release and let down some of those walls and allow ourselves to feel and to experience all of the feelings, all of the things that come with these events in our lives. So give yourself time each day to just take a breath. Make sure the exhale is bigger than the inhale. Take a big exhale. Find moments each day of gratitude and just reflection. Maybe it's acknowledging that you need to stop and eat. You need to rest. For some of us, it's exercising or allowing our brain to release that extra tension that we've built up, doing things that just help us relax just a moment. Nikki mentioned the media coverage, so some of it has been super helpful. People have shared resources and let people know where to go and how to get help. I've even seen social media be super helpful to find your pets. But for myself, I found that at times I needed to shut that down. I found myself avoiding social media for an evening and just accessing things that took me away from the reminders of the destruction that has happened in our community. So just remember, it's not selfish to take time to be with your friends and your family and your colleagues. You need to have these positive moments with each other to support each other. Take time to refill your cup. This is going to be a long journey for us to recover. So you're actually going to be more helpful for a longer period of time if you take care of yourself each step along the way for this full journey. For many of us, just being surrounded by caring individuals who are equipped with a trauma lens will be enough, and we'll be able to recover, and having natural supports in our lives is going to be enough to help us. But however, some may need professional support. So sometimes it might be obvious when there's a need for a referral to a trauma treatment or a mental health professional, but other times we're not so sure. We're not sure, is this just a part of our journey? Is this just a part of recovery? Or is this something that we really need to get more connected? So let's talk just for a moment about what are some of the questions that might lead us towards a mental health referral? What are some of those things we might be concerned about? Some of the questions we might ask ourselves is, are the symptoms excessive and are they causing impairment? So Nikki mentioned some of those sleeping and eating changes that may happen, or behaviors become excessive. So if those over a course of time, and usually we would say after a few weeks, give ourselves and give our communities a little bit of time. But after a few weeks, if you're seeing that they're still excessive, they're keeping us, keeping our students, our children, if they're keeping us for resuming some of those normal routines that we talked about, that might be a little bit of a red flag. Do you not see any improvement at all? Like they're still struggling just as much as they were that Friday afternoon or Saturday. You see absolutely no improvements. Nothing is getting better. Are they struggling to return to activities they previously enjoyed? So maybe we've got kiddos who used to play soccer or on a cheer team, whatever those extra activities were that our kids and youth previously enjoyed. They're struggling to get back to it, whether it's because they're afraid of separation, they're afraid of being in a certain place, but they're struggling just to find any enjoyment in their life. Do fears or worries or other strong feelings prevent them from moving forward with life and engaging with others, something they might have looked forward to? I think about some of our students who are seniors in high school, and there's a lot of ceremonies, a lot of events that happen in your senior year, and previously we're looking forward to it, maybe counting down the day to prom or graduation, and suddenly there's just no thought about that. There's little hope, or not looking forward to the things they used to look forward to. A referral to a mental health professional can help just assess these needs. So this is not an all-inclusive list. It's not if you check every box, you definitely need mental health services, but it's something to think about and something to consider. And there are evidence-based treatments for children and youth that are specifically focused on trauma. So children and youth from 0 to 18 experience any type of trauma. There are specific treatments for those, and there are mental health professionals that are trained in that. And they're trained to do that assessment, to work with the family and ask these questions. It's not a one-all-fits-all kind of assessment. There's lots of questions to be included in that. And think about that for our adults in our community as well, our teachers, our preschool teachers, support staff, bus drivers, everyone in our school community. We want to be thoughtful about what their recovery looks like and what their journey looks like to get back to where we were last Thursday before all of this happened. So how can we find these mental health professionals that I mentioned that are trained in trauma? One way to do that is to visit this website. This is RBEST. This is the umbrella that's over our TRIS that we were talking about today. And RBEST has trained over 1,000 therapists throughout the state that are specifically trained to work with children and family who have experienced trauma. So on this website, you can go here, and where you see clinician directory, the little suitcase, I think it's actually a first aid kit. You can actually go into that clinician directory. You could enter you can search by city, you can search by county, and it will list clinicians in that area and give their contact information of who's there, and reaching out to them to see what they have available for your community. Another thing to do while you're here is looking at that email sign up, getting a part of that RBEST newsletter so that you can receive resources or trainings that are coming from RBEST that are going to be related to trauma and treatment. The mental health referral process can be a bottleneck, and right now it is struggling because we have a lot of high needs in our state. So we are also partnering with one of our UAMS departments, the AR Connect Now, and they have a great service that they provide. And when you make that first call, there's a 1-800 number here, so it can come from anywhere in the state, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And within that first day to 2 days, they will be able to speak with a mental health clinician, and they'll be able to do that assessment, like I mentioned earlier, be able to ask some of those questions and dig in a little bit deeper to see what the needs are. And as you'll see here, this is for children as well as adults. So if you know of parents and caregivers that are struggling, if there are employees in your school that are struggling, AR Connect Now provides supports and connections for all ages. This is an additional contact information for AR Connect Now. If you follow their social media pages, they also share out resources and some of the work that they're doing out in the community. Even the past few days myself, this is one of the social media pages I have visited, because each day they've been sharing different positive affirmations, helping me to find a little bit of positive in my day. And that's been really helpful for me. So follow them on these social media. They also see an email connection there for AR Connect. Speaking of resources, as Nikki mentioned earlier, and Anna Kate also provided a link in the chat, TRIS also has social media presence, and we have a newsletter where we provide resources and share information related to the work that we are doing in the school communities throughout the entire state. So I encourage you to visit, to like our page, subscribe to our page. This is the most efficient way that we can share out resources we have with the community, and the fastest way we can do it. So if you'll check out that Facebook page, you'll find that. At the TRIS website, you can view some of the trainings that we also offer to schools. So any type of trainings, there are some self-care trainings that we can do, as well as some trauma 101 trainings. But if you'll visit that website, you can view that. There's an email address there, because sometimes there's specific questions or specific needs related to your school that don't quite fit anything you're seeing on the webpage. So if you email us at info@tris.ar.org, one of our team members will get back to you, usually within a day or two. We try to get back to people pretty quickly when they're using that email address. Some of the recent resources that we shared are on this slide, and so I just wanted to kind of show them to you. In that top left offers information to teens about how they might be feeling after a tornado and ways to cope with these feelings. This is from a great partner that we have, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. So it helps just kind of validate these teens and what they're feeling and what they're going through, and then how to help cope in a healthy way. You'll see Sesame Street always has great resources. If you work in early childhood and preschool years, you probably visit this website quite often. But we also found this coloring and discussion book for young children that families can do together and that you can do in your early childhood programs. That bottom left, I'm not sure if this is one that we have shared quite yet, but the bottom left, this isn't actually an app that can go on a phone or an iPad, and it's called Help Kids Cope. And this is also with our partner NCTSN, but it helps parents talk to their kids about disasters that they may face. And then it helps the parents how to have those conversations and what to talk about and what to look for. And this is a really great resources. Myself, I have some nieces that live down on the coast, and they have been through several hurricanes at different ages. And my sister-in-law shares every time she uses this app, she just gets a lot of support, validation as a parent, and they update the resources that are available on there. So every time she has unfortunately had to use this several times, she has found it to be very helpful. You can go to the nctsn.org website that we keep mentioning and just type in their search bar, Help Kids Cope, and this app will come up and you can download it, and you can probably also search on anywhere you get your apps. Also want to just highlight this fourth resource. If you go to NCTSN, they also have many resources that are translated into Spanish. So a lot of the parent handouts, if you're in a community where there's a heavy Spanish speaking population, you can get these caregiver handouts that are both in English as well as Spanish speaking, because we want to be as inclusive as we can with our resources.
If you are an early care and education provider, I hope that you have heard of Behavior Help, which is our state's program for supporting educators who are working with young ones struggling with behavior challenges. Project Play, our team of mental health consultants, is part of Behavior Help, along with our colleagues at A-State University and our partners at the Division of Child Care. What you may not know is that Behavior Help is a way that you can access supports after a time of crisis. When you're worried about maybe not specifically just child behavior, but the emotional well-being of a child or family that you're working with. And so you can reach out through the website you see on your screen, behaviorhelponline.org, and submit a request for help. You'll get a phone call from the Division of Child Care, and you can let them know what your concern is, and if it's related to kind of the recent events, you can share that information, and they'll get you connected with some support. If you have a question or need a resource for Birth to 5, kind of about early childhood mental health, you can email Project Play at the email address that you see on your screen, and we'd be happy to help share resources or answer questions. So at this point, we want to bring our trauma experts both onto the screen. Christine, who can answer questions about ways that we can support our youngest kids, and Emily, who can talk about ways that we can support our older kids. And so as you have questions, just drop them in, and Anna Kate will kind of facilitate this discussion.
Thanks, Nikki. We've had a few questions come in. One question is, how can we help kids feel safe and assured throughout the day? That could be for either of you, so whoever wants to take it.
So I'll just talk a little bit about the older kids. I think Nikki did a great job talking about just keeping with routine, knowing what to expect, what's going to happen next. We know that for some kiddos, even what we think is going to be this special surprise, we're all going to go to the gym for this assembly, or we're all going to go outside and do something. But oftentimes something new and different can startle children. So preparing them for what, if something's going to be different, I can remember a kid that would panic if they didn't have pizza on Fridays at school. It was like they ran out of pizza before he got to the lunchroom, and he had an absolute meltdown. So some of our kids, especially those who have experienced a traumatic event, routine and keeping with their expectations is really important to them. And Christine, that might be very similar with our younger kids, but you may have some specifics with the younger kids as well.
Well, yeah. So for the younger kids, definitely continuing with the routine, et cetera. But, you know, a lot of us early care folks, you know, we have the visual schedules up there. So teaching to the schedule, okay, we're doing this now, giving those transition reminders. In just a few minutes, we're going to switch and go do blah, blah, blah. So that you're preparing them, you're doing this stuff throughout the day anyway. So just, you know, one of my colleagues calls it doubling down, you know, just really being aware of where you are in the day, teaching to the schedule, and really everybody. It doesn't have to be taking little, you know, Emily over to the schedule. Here's what we're doing. If you can, I mean, you can if that's what she needs, but really everybody just may need that assurance, reminding them, okay, here's where we are now. In just a few minutes, we're going to transition and do this. So just keeping as much as you can with what you already are doing.
And never underestimate just telling them, you are safe here. I'm going to keep you safe. Like just putting it to words, especially our older and teenagers, sometimes they just need someone to say that to them. So they're going to hold you to it, but they just need to hear it sometimes.
And what are some things you would suggest doing with the students while they're in their safe place during the natural disaster? Yeah,
so I read I've been reading a lot on social media, just trying to understand what other people's experiences have been. And I've heard of some classes, they sang songs that a lot of the kids knew. They knew some of their cheers because they had homecoming recently. So they knew some of the school cheers. They were asking questions about events that were happening, like movies that were coming out. The teacher was just leading discussions and talking about things that had nothing to do with school, but just trying to keep their mind off of things. So that I was really interested. And one thing I did hear about, so this was a little bit after they came out of their safe places, but they were waiting for parents to get to them because sometimes it was a little bit longer. And this was one of our local schools. The teachers found and put together the Lion King and played it in one of their rooms. I don't know if it was the library or the cafeteria, but they played a movie for them, like something that they knew and they've seen lots and lots of times, had great music, had all of the comforting pieces to it. But they all came together, all of the students that were at the school, they all came together and they sat and they watched a movie while they waited for the parents or caregivers to come and pick up the kiddos.
Yeah, I had a teacher who was telling me, actually, she's a toddler teacher, and you know, they had some of their kids in the bathroom, and one teacher, she was singing songs with them and, you know, doing little finger plays and stuff. And the other teacher, she had them sitting under the tables where they were in their safe place, and they were singing songs. And you know, they had some pretzels so the kids could snack on. I mean, you're talking about little bitties, but you know, just like Emily said, the comfort things. You know, I always think about you know, my husband likes to laugh at me because I like to watch Hallmark movies. And especially when, you know, things are really stressful, you know, around like the holidays. And why do we like those things? Because they're predictable. We know what to expect. It's a predictable pattern, and that's what they need. So, you know, yes, for the older kids having those conversations, and maybe the younger ones too, you know, and even maybe if you in your class do some breathing activities, having them take some deep breaths and reminding their body to be calm in the moment, because sometimes you can sort of trick your brain a little bit if you can get your body to calm down. So
Great. One person wants to know, how do you help parents who are worried about leaving their children?
So in an early care setting, you can remind them, of the safety. So it's my job to keep your child safe, and that we have plans, we have drills. They know what to do and we know what to do. And, you may even have to show them, and here's what our tornado drill looks like on paper. Here's where we go for a fire drill, just assuring them that you have a plan and you know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the same for older kids. We're back to that plan and routine, and we know what's going to happen. For me, when my teenage son was at school on Friday, and afterwards, on Monday or over the weekend, we got an email from the school telling us what they did. So what was their process and what did they do, how the kids responded. And it kind of gave us some talking points at home over the weekend to kind of talk through that day, because I knew where he went, if there was like a siren that went off in the building, or was it quiet, like what was, and so I was able to have a conversation with him, and I got an understanding of what he went through. So when it was time to take him back to school on Monday, I felt more comfortable and safe because I knew that the school had put a lot of thought into this, and my son, felt safe there.
So from the other perspective, what do you do with when a kid is having a hard time coming to school, having a hard time at drop off, or, being reluctant to leave their parent?
So again, with the early care, you're going to rely on the safety language that you're probably already using. It's my job to keep you safe. I mean, you do that when they're climbing on the shelves. You have to keep your feet on the ground. We have to keep our bodies safe. So, I'm going to keep, Miss Christine is going to keep you safe today. And then extra connections that you're doing with them. So, you probably already have some little activities that you do. Maybe you don't already have a morning greeting. You could start one. There are lots of examples that you can find of videos of teachers that do little, morning greetings. I think actually, Arkansas Conscious Discipline, maybe there's I think there's a YouTube and Instagram and Facebook, and they have some ideas of connection activities that you could do as well. And so assuring the child and the parent and having some sort of extra connection that you can do. And then, maybe they might need a little comfort item from home, and that's okay. And that may be the little Emily that needs some extra comfort of, okay, here's the beginning of our day, looking at the schedule. Then we do this, then we do this, then mommy comes back to get you.
Yeah, for the older kids, it wasn't related to a natural disaster, but I remember an older student who was struggling to separate from a parent and be away from them during the day after an event. And he actually wore dad's shirt to school the first day. So it smelled like dad, it felt like dad. And so he could wear that. And so having a comfort item from home that they could take along with them, it's not like their blankie that their friends are going to make fun of because they're carrying in their backpack, but their friends thought they got a new shirt. They didn't know any different, but that student knew, this is my dad's shirt. It smells like him. It's wrapping around me just like a hug. And so that's what I have used with some older kids in the past.
Another question is that we have a policy for physical safety during a natural disaster. Should our school include a written policy or process for emotional safety as well? And what kind of guidance would you recommend for this?
So I don't know a lot about the policy world and written protocols and things like that, but I would certainly think about, when you look at your process, thinking about that emotional piece. Now, whether it needs to be in writing, I don't know, but definitely a discussion about how might this impact my students both in a drill as well as real time when an event happens. And for our K through 12, our TRIS crisis consultation team can actually support a school looking at what is their protocol, what do they currently do, and helping them think about that from a trauma lens and be thoughtful about how to support their students and staff, because the staff also are going through these events.
Yeah, well, and same with behavior help. We have Project Play and A-State ASUTA. We have partnered in some schools and done some very specific trauma trainings for schools, and part of that includes policy. And so I'm sure we have a plethora of people on our team who could help with any sort of language. And again, I'm not sure that it has to be you have to say this, but training on the language to use and how to, I suspect maybe the idea is to not make things worse. I feel like maybe the thought of this question is, how can I use language that is going to be comforting? And that's definitely something that we could help with.
Another question is, what do you say to children who lost everything or lost a family member?
I'm sticking with my gut reaction. Like, I had to just take a deep breath and say that, depending on their age, I'm used to working with older kids, like, that sucks. That's hard. That's really hard and difficult. And I think I would say some of those things to them and sit with them in it for a minute and talk about how hard that is.
Yeah, no, and I one of the trainings that I did one time was with a colleague, and we were talking about sitting in feelings and how, a lot of times we feel like we have to happy people up and forget that we can sit there with them in the moment. And it's still uncomfortable for Emily and me, but it's not maybe quite as uncomfortable as it might be for someone who is not who that's not their day to day. But if you haven't watched Inside Out, then I recommend that you do. But if you have, then you might remember that there's a part in the movie where there are two characters, Joy and Sadness, and there's another character, and he's the little elephant, Bing Bong, and he's really sad, and Joy keeps trying to make him feel happy, and Sadness just kind of sits with him and says, yeah, that's really sad, and that's okay to say.
Mm-hmm. And I think while we're sitting it, like, we feel the emotions, but then giving them opportunity to talk about it. Tell me about what your room looked like. What did you have? Because sometimes that might be the things we're scared to talk about. Well, I don't want to ask them because it's going to make them more sad. I'm not sure you're going to make them more sad than they already are, but giving them a space to talk about the things that they miss and the things that they had. Now, I know all of us are fixers in the back of our heads. So we're like, oh, I can get them that new thing. I can go to this and I can go to that. And that's okay, but also just giving them an opportunity to talk about the losses and talk about, what did that look like? If we might have them draw it if they're an artistic kid and draw, or maybe they've got pictures on their phone. If they're an older kid, there's in the backdrop of a selfie was their favorite poster or whatever. But talking about that loss.
A lot of kids are asking if we're going to have another tornado. How do we talk to them about that?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer in not lying. So obviously we can't say, no, everything is fine, there are no more tornadoes. I mean, you can be honest, well, we're not going to have one today. And there are people whose job it is to watch the weather for us so that we know when we need to be extra safe. And then remind them of, we have a plan. Remember, we made it through last time. We knew what to do. So I'm just, be honest. You don't have to talk about next week, though. You can talk about today.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, being honest. My own teenager on Tuesday asked, so he said, when is the next tornado coming through? And because he had heard adult conversations about storms. And I said, well, I think there are some storms coming through, but I don't know if they're going to turn into a tornado. Now he's older, so we made the decision to sit and watch the news together, the weather part of the news, so that he could have the information. He is the type of kid that wants the information. Otherwise, he's going to feel like you're hiding something. So you definitely have to make that decision for each kiddo. But for him, he needed information. And so we watched the weather together and we talked through it. And what does all that mean? And on Tuesday, he got to see like where the storms are going and be able to talk about it. So it was definitely about giving him information because he asked the question.
Similarly, we've already kind of touched on this, but how do you strike a balance when you're trying to reassure a child, but not dismiss their feelings? So if they've been through something very real and you want to reassure them, how do you reassure them without invalidating some very real feelings that they're having?
It's always helpful, I think, to name the feeling. You're asking me some questions. I think that maybe you are scared about this. That was kind of scary. That was really scary what happened before. And so you can acknowledge their feeling in the moment, breathe with them to help them to, get that heart rate back down, and also assure them that we have a plan. We're safe right now. We're safe today. So just really validating their feelings and also assuring them of safety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of it's very similar in the older kids. You just might use different language or things, but we may say, well, remember, if they start asking maybe about the next tornado or what about next time? Well, this time, this is what we did and we were safe. And so this is what we're going to do next time. Or do you remember that time, remember a time when you were really, really scared? We took those really deep breaths and then you didn't feel as scared anymore. Well, that's what we're going to do next time. So sometimes reflecting back of what worked before, and that's back to exactly what Christine mentioned. If you do these exercises on a regular basis, and that becomes part of your daily routine or schedule of doing some of this calming things, then when you need it, it's ready and it's there and to use.
And it may seem like you don't want to do that if you're a teacher who is not an early care teacher. So if you're a pre-K through 12th grade teacher, it may seem like silly, like, oh, my kids don't want to take a deep breath. But they do. We do trainings with adults and we encourage them to take some deep breaths, and they do, and they enjoy it. And, I'm sure Emily can attest to this. I mean, I've done group therapy with older kids. At one point I had a teen boys group, and we would start the group with taking just a couple of really good deep breaths. And if things started to get a little bit hairy, then we would bring it back together. So, so you can do those things with the older kids too.
And that leads, we have one last question. So that leads well into this one. How do I keep children calm and safe during a storm when I'm not calm and safe during a storm? I don't feel safe and calm during a storm.
That's a very good point. And one of the things we know sometimes about helpers is that we will push down our emotions and our feelings to take care of other people. But what if it starts oozing out and I'm panicking and I'm not calm? That's very difficult. And that's back to maybe practicing those skills together and being able to take the deep breath and being able to, maybe it's what we would call some grounding or mindfulness, like being able to just think about something different, think about something more positive, being able to, in this situation, the sirens went off, we got in our safe place, we're doing everything that we plan to do and everything that we can to do to keep us safe. And that's what we're going to do every time. And just being present in that moment with each other to take those deep breaths and relaxation pieces.
And also, do you have a person who you could reach out to real quickly and just say, hey, I'm having a moment, or I'm kind of freaking out here, who could remind you, hey, you're doing the things that you need to do. Take a deep breath. You got this. Because sometimes I don't listen to myself, but I call Elizabeth and she tells me, okay, look, you can do this. Just take a deep breath. You're freaking out and I get it. and also you need to breathe. So, you know, do you have somebody who you can connect with who is going to remind you to do the things that help you to regulate?
I just thought about one other thing that I read. One lady, when she was in her safe place and the storms were going over, she pulled up her phone and just looked at photos of her family. And that brought her some, even though she wasn't with them, it actually brought her comfort. And she had pictures of a family vacation they recently went on. And so she kind of took her mind and then her body, like she was kind of more focused on these better times and focused on those pictures and those memories than she was in the moment of what's happening.
Well, that's very helpful. Thank you both for guiding us through that conversation, and for all of you for that really helpful information. Again, for those of you who are ECE providers and you need PDR credit, make sure your name and your PDR number is in the chat. We'll make sure you get credit. If there's not anything else, that concludes our webinar today, but thank you, Dr. Edge, Emily, and Christine. We really hope that this is helpful for you as we support our communities and support each other after these scary storms and this difficult time. You know, we always hope that we won't need this information, but of course we will need it going forward. It will happen again. So we're here for you if you need us. You know how to contact us, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you. Bye, everybody.